With adult hindsight, what was a complete WTF moment from your childhood that you didn't understand at the time? When I was about 11 and my sister was 14, she came home from a sleepover with a large red welt on her neck. When my mother questioned her about it, she wove an epic tale of a fight amongst friends, culminating in the use of Tootsie Rolls as projectiles. Though she had remained neutral, she was sadly struck in the neck during the crossfire. My mom apparently decided to see how far my sister was willing to take this story. She feigned indignation and said she wanted the phone numbers for the girl that threw the Tootsie Roll and the girl that hosted the party, to inform their mothers of the incident. There was talk of cutting those friends out of my sister's life. At the time, I was horrified that had happened to her. Years later, I realized my mother decided to troll instead of addressing the fact that her daughter came home from a girls only supervised sleepover with a hickey. I was 6 or 7. My mom woke my brother and I up and told us to get in the car. Seems strange, but she was totally calm. So, whatever. I remember hearing loud noises and yelling, which was not unusual but it always scared me. I went into the garage and got in the back seat, brother in front. Mom walks out and gets in the car and tells us we're going to McDonald's for ice cream. As we back out, my dad staggers into the garage and throws a beer bottle at the car. It breaks against the ground. I found out many years later my dad got fired that night from a job he had worked at least 10 years. I think I was 4 or 5. My parents were fighting, which was a pretty common occurrence, but I remember this time my dad yelling for someone to get him a knife so he could kill himself. Not understanding what that meant at the time and wanting the yelling to stop, I started to go to the kitchen to get a knife until my older brother stopped me. I'll take how to depress thousands of people in 3 sentences for $1,000, Alex. Around 9:10, riding my bike through the neighborhood, was about to ride up into my driveway when this guy pulls over next to my bike and waves me over. Asks me if I want a ride. I say no. My house is right there. You sure? We could throw your bike in the trunk if you're worried about it. Very insistent. Nope. Just walk the 20 featuring to my front door. 20 years later, and I still wonder if that was just a nice old guy or someone with some sketchy motives. IDK. Sounds sketchy. Nice people usually stop asking when you say no once. My mom has mis and didn't want me and my sister to see how bad it could get when we were little. So we would go to Chuck E. Cheese all day on her worst days during the summer. Or if she couldn't cook during the school year, we'd have eggs for dinner. Me and my sister thought those days were the coolest things and so much fun. It took me years to realize she was doing it so we weren't scared by her disabilities. She's a brilliant and awesome mom. That's an impressive way to handle it. Me and my brother crawled in my parents' room while they were doing it because the only TV we had was in my parents' room and The Simpsons were on. I just thought they were kissing, but no, they were really going at it. We were there for like 10 minutes before they noticed. Picking up random objects around the playground to play with in the sand, I picked up a flimsy plastic tube which I had believed to be a fruit snack wrapper or something of the sort. Was actually a used condom. Without any parents around, I used it to fill sand and throw around. It haunts me to this very day. So I grew up poor, really poor, but I was young and never had an indication of how bad things were until this happened. I thought everyone lived like we did. In 3rd grade I had a pair of boots from Payless that I'd worn for so long it wasn't winter anymore and the heel had dislodged from the rest of the boot. Only pair of shoes I had that fit. It flopped while I walked and I often tried to glue it back on with Elmer's at school, or tape it on, which never lasted long. One day I come to class and 2 girls hand me 2 new boxes of shoes, saying they bought them for me. One was a pair of dressy shoes with a buckle and the other was a pair of pink moccasins with rhinestones on the toe. I was delighted but didn't think much of it, not even in the days afterward when some other kids started calling me poor. Funny because almost all of us lived in the same public housing high-rise and food stamp was a common phrase because you could buy snacks with them. So it just goes to show my family was the poorest of the poor. I don't even know if anyone in my family noticed the shoes, but I know my mother never asked me about them. Then again, she was always working or claimed to be working, so I never saw her more than once a day. Many years later I realized the teacher had bought those shoes and asked the other kids to pretend they had. Thank you, Mrs. Benjamin. Way to go, Mrs. Benjamin. When I was about 11 I woke up to my 17-year-old cousin with his dong out joking around and peed on me. Had to promise I wouldn't tell on him. Later in life realized dude jerked on my head while I was sleeping. I was staying at my sister's apartment complex for the weekend and took her dog out to the parking lot for a walk at around 10 PM. A guy stepped out of his van and started asking me questions. The gist was, does the dog bite number? Some small talk. I live in this van. It is pretty cool. Do you want to come in and see number? I went back inside and told my sister about this weird guy. She flipped out, told me to stay here, and stormed outside. She came back and said she couldn't find the van. When I was in kindergarten, we had a little bathroom in our classroom, like a supply closet, but with plumbing, that we could use so that we wouldn't have to go down the hall whenever we needed to. One day, while I was in there, I realized that there was no toilet paper. My solution was to walk out of the bathroom, pants down, in front of the whole class, and explain to my teacher the situation. In the middle of her lesson. It's one of those memories that makes me physically cringe anytime I think about it. I once unbuttoned and took off my shirt in the middle of class because it was hot when I was like 7. I remember doing it confidently and I have no idea why I would have. I'm not smart, but that's just baffling and I can't fathom what compelled me to do it. Came home from school, 4th grade, and ran into my room to change into baseball pants and grab my bat bag cause I was running late to practice. Opened my bedroom door and my older brother and his girl were banging in my bed. They just told me they got tired and his sheets were washing. I thought nothing of it, changed, grabbed my bag and on my way to practice I was none the wiser. For my 6th birthday I had some friends over for a BBQ. We were all being rambunctious little boys, running around the garden pretending to shoot each other, wrestling, rolling around etc. My dad was setting up the barbecue and somehow managed to burst the lighter fluid bottle and set fire to his arm. All we saw was my dad suddenly rolling around on the lawn, on fire. At 6 years old, my only experience with seeing people on fire was from the A-Team, in which nobody ever actually suffered any serious consequences and burning people were just part of the background scenery. We all just figured my dad was getting really into our make-believe games, so we were all just cheering and running around him. He's hard as nails, so when he had managed to smother the fire he just stood up and said back in a minute, kids with a big smile on face and disappeared indoors. My neighbor came over to take care of the barbecue whilst my parents went to the hospital to take care of dad's burns. We all just continued running around shouting and wrestling like little savages. Your dad's reaction, dang, can't be on fire in front of the kids, that will scare them really good, is amazing. Right around the time I turned 21, it finally clicked why my dad's office in the garage always smelled like a skunk drenched in cologne. Turns out Old Spice hides the smell of weed reasonably well. The two smells combined is super calming for me because of childhood memories. First time I smoked weed in high school I instantly thought of pizza night and listening to the Doors like we did on the weekend as a kid. Smells are weird. I went to daycare with a girl who was about a year or two younger than myself, and she had an older brother. Everyone bullied her. She was rude and loud, would lie and steal. Still went to the bathroom in her pants at 6'7". Her brother was held back enough grades that he was in my grade even though he was older. Her family was the trashy family. I remember laughing at her and calling her a liar because she would tell me her brother would hold her down and pee in her mouth. Or they would be wrestling and he would pee on her. Or pin her under the dirt bike and leave her there for hours. God, I feel awful realizing that he was abusing her and I did nothing. It makes it worse that my best friend's dad is on the same roofing team as him, so I have to see him most times I visit. There was a solid year growing up where my mom, dad, and I ate lots of macaroni and cheese and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I was in little kid heaven. Thought it was the best thing. Never realized we didn't have crap and my parents did the best they could to hide it. This actually made me so sad. I ate a lot of KD and canned potatoes as a kid. My mom was a widow at age 30. Dad died from cancer when he was 29. So she did the best she could as a young single mom of 3 kids. We never really knew either. We just assumed it was what she liked making. I was maybe 8 or 9, but we were pretty bad off at the time. I remember sometimes late at night my mom would dress up super fancy, complete with a big trench coat, and she would have me ride with her to random houses and tell me to sit in the car while she went to go see some friends. I'd wait for a while and then she'd come out and we'd leave, and if I was really good, she'd take me out to dinner the next day. Now as an adult, I'm pretty much 99% she was selling her body to make ends meet, which is absolutely horrible, but hot dang did she do her best to keep me from starving to death. Similar story, my mom used to go stay the night at the guy down the street's house and help him clean his house. She would always come home with a whole bunch of groceries and give each of us some money. But at the time I thought it was like a job, till one day she couldn't go anymore because he had a girlfriend to clean his house now. When I was about 6 years old, I picked up a Brazil nut out of a jar and asked my stepmother what it was. She told me it was a ento. When I asked her what a N was, she told me it was another word for friend. A couple weeks later I got chewed out at my mother's house for calling my sister a N. I was so confused. Same story, only substitute chocolate covered coconut bonbons for Brazil nuts. My grandparents were a trip. When I was about 8, I was climbing trees with a friend when I got the neck of my shirt snagged on a branch. I swung the dead man's swing and my friend laughed and then ditched me there hanging. When I was about to black out, my shirt ripped and I fell to the ground. I got yelled at for ruining a shirt and being covered in blood and dirt. Sorry about almost dying, mom. It'll only happen a million more times. I was placed in foster care at an early age because of abuse, and I had to see a counselor on the regular. This counselor's name was Bryant. Bryant's office was full of interesting things. He had dolls so kids could point to where Uncle Jimmy touched them. He had crayons and paper and all sorts of other crap. And he had 2 plastic totes full of sand. One was full of wet sand, the other full of dry sand. I'm sure I don't know what the ostensible purpose of the sand was. Moving on. I was 6 when the sessions began, and for nearly a year I had to see this guy every 2 weeks to tell him how I felt about my foster parents and how was school. It wasn't until many years later that I realized this guy was a pervert. He always locked the door to his office and then he would pull out the sand boxes and he'd say, pretend we're at the beach. He'd encourage me to take my shirt off because, hey, it's the beach. On a couple of occasions he tried to give me a massage by pinching my shoulders, but my muscles weren't developed. That crap hurt. I told him so and he stopped. And that's it. He never did anything else. A year later I stopped seeing him when one of his co-workers got in trouble for hiding X-Men cards in his pockets and having my older brothers fish them out. It was like a whole organization of creeps. When it finally occurred to me that this was unusual, I was much older and it peed me off because there was this guy fondling helpless victims of child abuse. Frickin' earth. This might be the most messed up one I've read in here. This one's fairly depressing. After my parents divorced, my mother had custody of the kids, but my dad would come and pick me and my brothers up on Saturday afternoons for a couple of hours. We would usually go to the comic book store and Pizza Hut or something, and then he'd take us home. My mom had mental problems and was abusive, so these visits were the highlight of my week. Some weeks my dad just never showed up, and I waited for him as it became more and more obvious he wasn't going to show up, which meant that I wouldn't get pizza and I wouldn't go to the comic book store that week, and my mom would be pee off all day because she'd have to stay home and take care of 4 kids unexpectedly. Those were really bad days. One day he came to pick us up, and we were out of the house for maybe half an hour, and he pulled his station wagon over to the side of the road and started crying. My brothers and I had no idea what was going on, and we were too afraid to ask. After a little while he composed himself and in a clear voice stated, "Children, I've wet myself." He told us that he was going to take us back to our house and drop us off with our mother, and then he would go home for the day. I begged him to just go back to his house and change his pants, and we could still spend the day together. He wouldn't do it. Not too long after that he stopped showing up for visits altogether. It's one of my most vivid memories, but as strange as it sounds, I never really questioned why my father peed himself that day. I knew that my dad struggled with alcoholism throughout his life, but it was only in the past few years that I put 2 and 2 together and realized that my father was either drunk or drying out that day. My heart broke reading this. I'm so sorry. Being shot at by my brother. We used to go hunting together when I was between about 9 and 11. He taught me all about gun safety, how you should never point a firearm at anything but the ground or sky unless you intend to fire it, and above all never ever point it at a person, not even as a joke. One day we were out hunting and I was standing a little way away from him. I looked up to see his pointing his gun at me. I moved to one side just as he pulled the trigger and I felt something pluck at the sleeve of my sweater. There was a small hole in the material. I was so confused and asked him why he had shot at me. He laughed it off and said of course he hadn't. He hadn't been shooting anywhere near me. I didn't question it anymore at the time. Now I think, why the heck was my brother trying to shoot me? It was a couple years after that when his mental health problems started showing themselves. I probably have a couple more WTF moments if anyone is interested. When I was young, about 6-7 years old, I was sleeping when awoken by bright lights coming through my window. Naturally, I freaked out and woke up my pops. He told me to go back to bed while he investigated. The bright lights kept shining through all of the windows, one after the other in no particular order. At the time, I had no idea what this bright light could have been. It was terrifying. I've literally had nightmares that start out the same way since then. Years later at my father's funeral, my dad's best friend comes over and starts telling this story from another perspective. He tells me when we all younger and I was cop, I'd fly the police helicopter over to your house and shine the lights on your house to mess with your dad. He'd come outside and moon us. All this time, I had no idea what the bright lights were until then. It all made sense. Our cop friend was using the police helicopter to play with us. I found this out 20 years later. Crazy. This one's my favorite. All these dark, depressing, and downright fricked stories. Then there's the image of a man mooning a police chopper in my head and I'm laughing like an idiot. There was a day where all the girls were removed from class to talk about periods. I went home and went on an entire rant about how ridiculous it was that girls needed some extra class on periods. They go at the end of sentences. Everyone know how they work. My mom didn't explain. She just laughed and laughed. I would always get mad at my mom for packing me homemade sandwiches. All my rich friends' parents were giving them ramen noodles for lunch and we would eat them raw and thought they were delicious. I always thought my mom didn't buy me that because she hated me and wanted me to eat boring food. One day, in college, while buying ramen I recalled the stuff from my childhood. I realized that although we were poor, my mom made me homemade lunches every day, and my rich friends' parents were just sending them off with whatever took the least effort. My sister would pick fights with me in public, so I started acting retarded so everyone near her thought she was harassing someone with special needs. Although it was funny and clever, but I can't believe she didn't get in more trouble. One time this big guy was just like, "I think you need to leave him alone. Where are your parents?" in a scary deep voice. That is genius. When I was 5 or 6, while I was playing outside, some dude on his motorbike stopped next to me and asked me if I wanted to take a ride with him. He had a second helm and all. I said no. He asked a few more times and then left. No idea what would have happened if I had said yes. Nothing good probably. Obviously an awesome motorcycle adventure would have occurred, ending in you earning a patch due to the awesome crap you helped motorcycle man with. You missed out, dude. My doctor would tell me to lie really still, cup my vulva and listen to my heartbeat. I believe that I saw this doctor up until age 10. If a doctor sees this post and can tell me what he was doing, I'd really appreciate it. Not emotionally scarred. I hope no other children he saw were. If I have children, they will be properly supervised. Yikes. Worrying about other children with parents in the waiting room is going to bug me. This doctor is still practicing at the same location. At some point today, I will figure out who to contact about this. For clarification, he cupped me. I found my dad's gun underneath the seat and without hesitation pointed it at my sister and pulled the trigger. Pew pew. It was empty, but the thought of what might have happened, and indeed what happens to lots of kids every year, makes me cold and sick at the same time. Jesus. Store your gun safely, people. A neighbor girl would always pester me to see my willy, and I always told her no. Finally, I decided, while she wasn't around, that I would show her. So I walked up to her door right out there in the open, dropped throw, and rang the doorbell. That's the best way to approach that situation, right? Then there was the time on the bus on the way home from kindergarten. My friend and I had somehow gotten involved in a deal with a girl where we would give her an orange slice, not a whole orange, just a single segment, and she would show us what she had down there, and then we'd give her another slice, and she'd do it again until the orange was gone. Ha. My cousin told me to lick her butthole, so I did. We were both about 6 years old. Same here, except we were both in our 40s. I demanded that my mother made me a little brother when I was 5. I thought that being 5 years older was the perfect age difference because we were close enough in age to play together, but I would be old enough to win any arguments or fights. Same here. She didn't though, and all I got was one lousy sister. She stopped being cool once she started moving around, so I couldn't build toy car ramps on her. I went over a friend from school's house for the first time when we were like 8, and his family had a room solely with a heaping pile of rotting garbage. Apparently when they'd peel a banana or open a wrapper, they'd just chuck it in there. My high school boyfriend's house was like this. They were disgusting. Didn't own a single trash can. They just threw crap in a corner in the kitchen. Grew up poor in Russia, and at the time fresh fruit was hard to come by. On the rare occasion my parents procured some oranges, they would give them all to me because they didn't like them. Of course they did. They just wanted me to have the few spoils they could afford. This guy finger banging this lady on top of a huge turtle sculpture at this place called Lake Osceola in New York. I was probably 6 years old. He was laughing at us watching and drinking a beer with one hand, and she was staring at me and the other kid I randomly was aging with at the time. I just remember thinking it was super unusual and had no idea what I was watching. Mom. EFT douche bottle with spray nozzle and shower. 6-year-old me was filling it up with water and spraying all over myself, mouth, and ugh, the horror when I think about it. I always thought my mom had a bad cough. I would hear her every day coughing in her room. All those late night trips to Denny's make a lot more sense as a pothead adult. Now I think I remember a roach in the ashtray that I noticed didn't look like one of my parents' cigarettes. When I was about 6, my mom would try to use code words to her friends when I was around, so that way I wouldn't repeat it. She would talk about how one of her friends had the heebie-jeebies and gave a girl the heebie-jeebies and now she's really thin and really sick in the hospital. I had no idea what she was talking about. The only time I heard that word from anywhere else was from Scooby-Doo, and that meant the creeps. So, I thought that the guy gave the girl the creeps and then she got really sick. Didn't make sense to me. That proves your mom's way worked. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.